It's new, it's shiny, and it's got a big-ass shield. Hey there friends, it's Livid here, one half of the team behind Legacy Gaming, and today we're bringing you our endgame Phalanx build. So you know what playstyle, weapons, and perks will help you tackle the most challenging content in Alien's Fireteam Elite. Alright, I want to be completely upfront with y'all here. I really don't enjoy the Phalanx in its current state, and that's not to say that it doesn't have a cool kit or that it can't be strong. I just think there's a bunch of things that could be adjusted or even added that would just make this class viable in pretty much all situations. Because right now, it just isn't. Let me explain. The Phalanx is supposed to be all about tanking and keeping your allies safe, and right now, one of two things end up happening if you try to do just that. First, enemies will just run right past you because the Phalanx has absolutely no way to aggro enemies. And for a tank, that just doesn't make sense. Now, even making the shield do some sort of 5 to 10 second taunt effect when being deployed would go a long way to solving this problem. It doesn't even need a dedicated ability, just slap it onto the shield itself. Now second, enemies will take full advantage of the fact that your block region is so small that most of the time their attacks will hit you on the side even though they are directly in front of you, causing you to not only stagger, but also put away your shield for some reason. I mean, what? Why? It's clear that the developers want you to be soaking up damage for your team, but the only enemies the Phalanx is really capable of dealing with are the synths. And maybe that's by design, and the team is setting up for some future synth content in the form of missions, or even a new horde map. But for right now, it's incredibly frustrating trying to make the kit synergies work in every other situation. Now, mini rant aside, there are some key things to take note of with the class that will inform how we build it. First off, when your shield is deployed, you'll move slow. Now, we want to negate that effect as much as possible. Second, you're going to be up close to enemies, so making sure your weapon spread is as tight and efficient on ammo as possible will help keep you in the fight and the enemies off your team. Time to break down the kit. Now, Shield Up is the Phalanx's main ability that will allow you to deploy a shield that blocks most shots from the front but severely reduces your movement speed. Now, what this actually translates to is you'll block light attacks from most melee sources, ranged attacks from synthetics, and the stagger effect that Spitter Goo normally inflicts but still drops a pool of acid right at your feet. Now, Prowler pounces, bursters, and pathogen explosions, and even elite grapples will all go through, so you still have to rely on your dodge roll for some damage mitigation. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at it, when your shield is deployed, you can still freely dodge roll, but it will put away your shield every time. Bulwark is the passive kit perk for the Phalanx that ties directly into your shield. Now, every time that you block an attack, you'll gain a stack of Bulwark up to 5 stacks maximum, and each one will increase your damage dealt by 3% for 4 seconds. Now, this sounds great in theory, but it really only shines against synthetic enemies. Because of the lack of a taunt mechanic, you can have instances where runners are meleeing you super consistently and keeping your stacks up, or just completely avoiding you. Because of this fact, as we get further into the build, we are not building into Bulwark at all. Now, the last ability that we have at our disposal is the super potent Shock Pulse. Kind of like the Demolisher's Blast Wave, this will immediately stun nearby enemies but also cause any enemies that melee you for a short duration become dazed. Enemies affected by this will also take a damage over time effect. Honestly, it's a really cool ability that would be even cooler if you could taunt enemies with it, forcing them to attack you. Now, we've instead used one of the modifiers in the Perk Grid to convert this to Concussion Pulse, which, as the name implies, makes the initial blast of this ability concussive. It'll deal a small amount of damage to everything you hit, have a larger radius, and even knock enemies backwards and down for 3 seconds. Now, you do sacrifice your buff that makes enemies dazed when they melee your shield, but that's a price we're happy to pay for potent utility. Now, what looked at first to be a promising team support and aggro machine is now shaping up to be more about long-term survival, damage, and control, which I think, in the current state of the game, will be the best path forward. But this is only our first stop on the road to building an effective Phalanx. So let's move along and talk about the weapons. When it comes to making an impact with this class in Horde mode or during campaign missions, you need weapons that will perform well up close and last through the unrelenting waves of enemies. Thankfully, the Phalanx class gets both a handgun and a CQW slot. Now, the Type 95 combat pistol has become my absolute go-to for this handgun slot. It boasts a really decent fire rate, considerable damage, has basically no recoil, and is effective at most ranges. It's honestly the perfect backup weapon. Now in terms of attachments, we're just running the vented flash hider, tactical mag, and hybrid sight to make sure we have high accuracy, a substantial weak point damage increase, some extra fire rate, and a large boost to our ammo reserves. Now we're going to rely on our handgun in two distinct situations, when enemies are far away and when our CQW weapon has been drained of its ammo. Now it's actually shocking how much damage this weapon can output once you get used to it. The other weapon in the mix here is our CQW, and in this case, it's the M37A3 pump shotgun. Now this is easily one of the best weapons in the game, full stop. And the fact that we get the opportunity to one-hand this weapon while keeping ourselves safe behind a shield is nothing to laugh at. With this build, the key here is to put a significant portion of our cards into making sure this weapon does work whenever it's out. And to do that, we need to make sure the accuracy is as high as possible. The higher your accuracy, the tighter your spread of pellets, which in turn means way more damage hitting your enemy's weak points. That begins with the mods. So we're using the precision brake, overload rounds, and hybrid sight for this weapon in particular. The precision brake gives us a nice boost to weak point damage, but also extends our effective range significantly for dealing with prowlers and keeping a solid distance between you and elites. The overload rounds are also nothing short of incredible on this weapon, and especially this build. Now why is that exactly? With each weak point hit that you land, you do a 5% thermal explosion. Now if you didn't know, each pellet in a shotgun can proc this effect, meaning you can have up to 13 instances of a 5% explosion going off when all pellets land. I don't think I need to say how incredible that is. Plus, it also ups our total magazine capacity by 15%. Now last up is the hybrid sight. Now this gives us a whopping 30% stability, which reduces recoil and also gives us a solid boost to weak point damage. Combine that with your 4-star bonuses on this weapon and you have a bug squasher ready to go. Now both of these weapons together round out the entirety of the Phalanx's kit, but to really see how effective this loadout can be in a fight, well, we have to look at the perks. Now if you're just jumping through this video to see the perk guide, and you see this, you are probably wondering why there are so few Phalanx specific perks in this perk grid. To that I say, it's because you don't need them, at least with the current state of this class. Now how we augment the overall accuracy, stability, and move speed of the Phalanx are probably the most important aspects here, especially with the move speed penalty that our shield causes. So it's probably best that we start with those. Covering fire, it's pretty straightforward. You won't always have the time or visibility to constantly be an ADS mode. So with this, while shield up is active, your non-ADS accuracy and stability are increased by a massive 50%. This basically lets you hipfire pistols, shotguns, and SMGs, and maintain a pretty tight spread on your shots without even aiming down the sights. Now the best defense is the other shield mod that we're rocking here. Sure, it makes our melee damage increase by 100% while shield up is active, but the important piece here is reducing our movement speed penalty by 25%. Now if you're dealing with hordes of enemies up close, you need to be able to reposition and turn to threats quickly. This helps substantially with that. Now we also want to slot in resilience. Now this does give us a 20% resistance to stuns, but more importantly, it gives us a 10% increase to both ADS movement speed and shield move speed. Now if you're ADSing with your shield, that's a 20% move speed increase. Just look at the difference between no move speed perks and move speed perks. I will bet that you won't want to go back after trying them. Then you'll notice I have a few weapon enhancements here, which I rarely ever include in my builds, but for this class, due to both a lack of solid options and needing to boost our CQW effectiveness, this is what we do. We use Technician CQW training to up our reload speed and accuracy of CQW weapons by 15%. Then, we attach the Phalanx CQW expertise to increase our magazine capacity and accuracy of CQW weapons by another 15%. Finally, we slot the Recon CQW expertise. This gives us a smaller 10% increase to fire rate, handling, and ADS movement speed of CQW weapons. Now you can swap this one out for Gunner CQW Mastery if you really need more accuracy, but I felt like this was already hitting the cap. With all of these weapon buffs, we can see that our shotgun now fires quite far with a really tight spread, which is really important to maximizing your damage. So much so that I started 1 to 2 hitting prowlers that got too close to me and significantly contributed to overall damage when a gunner was around to boost that fire rate. Then we move into Shock Pulse, and we already talked about how we converted it to Concussion Pulse for the larger area of effect and the 3-second knockdown effect. Now, because we aren't running any of the bulwark perks and can't always rely on having a recon pups build on our team, we want to mitigate the cooldowns of this ability to around 20 seconds. We do that by using the batteries included perk and the gunner's rapid deployment perk, both giving us 20% extra recharge speed. Now, the other two perks that we attach to our concussion pulse are Aftershock and Shell Shock. Aftershock, which is only found by farming hidden caches, makes our concussive pulse leave behind an electric field for 10 seconds that massively slows enemies passing through it. It's basically the consumable static grid on demand. Now, because it lasts for 10 seconds, you'll essentially have an effective downtime on your concussion pulse of only around 10 seconds, so not bad. Now, with Shell Shock, we make it so when we activate concussion pulse, enemies affected by it take an additional 10% damage for 4 seconds. I know that isn't a super long window, but if you are working with a gunner to pop overclock simultaneously between this and the last perk that we still have to talk about, you could easily kill an elite in these 4 seconds because of it. We finish this all up by simply adding Down and Out, the Demolisher universal perk. This further amps our damage from our shotgun after activating concussion pulse or whenever our teammates knock an enemy down. Now, I think it's important to explain why we don't use some of the other perks here. Basically, everything that ties to bulwark currently I find is pretty useless, and you only get the benefit super situationally. Synthetics are really the only consistent buildups of stacks, with aliens being a hit or a miss, and most of the spicy pathogen popcorn enemies being something that you don't want to block anyway because you still take damage. Are the bulwark perks amazing when you manage to get 5 stacks consistently? Oh, you betcha. But that's sadly not the case most of the time. Also, something like Hard-Headed is awesome with the base level shock pulse, or even the shock barrier perk if you're going for more of a damage resistance build. But if you're using concussion pulse, you will completely waste the 6 seconds of stun immunity, since enemies will spend 3 seconds on the ground and 2 to 3 trying to get back to you right after. Now, I think it's safe to say that this perk grid is probably not what you were expecting. I'm actually willing to bet on it, but in action, the results don't lie. Like I said, if the class gets a taunt down the line, I'll change my mind entirely here. But for right now, I'm sticking to my guns on this build after testing countless options. Now, when it comes to consumables, I think I've definitely changed my mind as time has gone on. Cryogrid and vulnerability assessment drones are still fantastic options, and I think they're completely viable in all situations. But having both the incendiary sentry gun and the electroshock sentry gun will give your team serious covering fire for those end of mission fights, especially at high-end difficulties. Now, just remember though, you need to place these in smart positions like railings and boxes that are hard for enemies to reach. So at this point, we only have one question left to answer. Where does the Phalanx fit on a team? Now, in my opinion, this class synergizes extremely well with 2 buffing classes. In an ideal world, a gunner for that sweet overclock and additional stun, and a recon for some insane map-wide slow, ammo generation, and even cooldown reduction. Now, you could also make the argument that a gunner, technician, and Phalanx would get the job done, especially when you have to deal with enemies susceptible to the absolutely busted technician flame turret. If you've checked out any of our guides by this point, you'll know that most classes have no shortage of killing potential or support. It all depends on how you build them. So there you have it, everyone. This is our endgame build for the Phalanx. Of course, my way is not the only way, so if you have any critiques or want to share what you use for your build, feel free to let us know in the comment section below. We love hearing from you guys. Now, if you enjoyed this video, we'd love some support. If you love video games and you want more in-depth guides, reviews, and fresh content in your feeds almost every day, please consider hitting that thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. It's still the single best way to help channels like ours reach new audiences. We also invite you to join us on Discord. We've got a great community of around 7,000 members with a special section just for Aliens Fireteam Elite. So check the link in the description below to join today. Finally, if you like everything we stand for here at Legacy Gaming, and you want to support us just a little bit more, you can now do so by becoming a member. For just a few bucks, you're helping evolve the channel and take our community to the next level. My name is Livid, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.